The reality behind the curtain is far more clinical and far more devastating. On April 3, 2026, the strategic architecture of the Persian Gulf was fundamentally altered. A coordinated wave of Iranian missiles and drones struck two of the most critical infrastructure nodes in Kuwait. The first was a major desalination plant. The second was a primary oil refinery complex. The mainstream media is reporting on the fires. They are discussing the tactical success of the air defense interceptions, but they are ignoring the cold mathematics of the aftermath. To understand what just happened, we must peel back the first layer of the onion. This was not a military engagement. This was a biological and economic ultimatum. For decades, the official narrative in Washington and the Gulf capitals was built on the premise of an impenetrable regional shield. Billions of dollars were invested in Patriot missile batteries, terminal high-altitude area defense systems, and integrated radar networks. The public was told that these desert nations were secure anchors of global energy. That is the illusion. The structural reality we face today is that a $13 billion defense architecture was bypassed by a swarm of drones that cost less than a luxury sedan. The geography of Kuwait is a strategic nightmare for a defender. It is a flat, small territory with no natural fresh water sources and highly concentrated industrial assets. In a stretch of desert where every drop of water is manufactured by electricity, geography has turned a modern state into a hostage. The Iranian planners understood this with cold precision. They did not target military barracks. They did not target command centers. They targeted the biological survival mechanism of the state. The strike on the desalination plant is the most significant development of this conflict to date. Why? Because you can survive without oil for a month. You can survive without electricity for a week. But you cannot survive in a desert for more than 3 days without fresh water. By striking the desalination infrastructure, Iran has demonstrated that it possesses the water weapon. This is an asymmetric lever that renders traditional military might irrelevant. Washington can deploy 2 aircraft carrier strike groups to the region. They can fly thousands of sorties with stealth fighters, but they cannot manufacture water for 4 million people under fire. Let us look at the tactical truth behind the interceptions. The official statements claim that 80% of the incoming threats were neutralized. In the world of strategic realism, 80% is a failure. The United States and its partners are firing interceptor missiles that cost $3 million per shot. Iran is launching drones manufactured from consumer-grade electronics and lawnmower engines. The cost of a single Shahed drone is approximately $20,000. The mathematics of this conflict are inverted. For every dollar Iran spends to put a threat in the air, the United States must spend $150 to remove it. This is not a war. This is a bankruptcy proceeding. Washington is using a silver bullet to kill a fly, and Iran has a billion flies. When the defense systems work, they drain the American treasury. When they fail, as they did today in Kuwait, they destroy the economic and biological viability of the alliance. The refinery at Shuaiba is currently a pillar of fire. That fire represents the liquidation of Kuwaiti sovereign wealth and the erosion of American security guarantees. This brings us to the second-order effects that the news cycle is ignoring. The events in Kuwait are already propagating through the global financial system. This is where the crisis stops being a Middle Eastern story and becomes your story. The maritime insurance companies in London have already begun to reassess the risk of the entire Gulf. It is not just about the ships, it is about the ports. If a refinery in Kuwait can be struck with such precision, no terminal in the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia is safe. When insurance premiums for tankers surge, the price of oil does not just rise, it breaks the logic of the global supply chain. We are already seeing Brent crude climb toward $140 per barrel. But that is only the beginning. The real casualty of the Kuwait strike is the petrodollar. For 50 years, the global order has rested on a single unspoken deal: The United States provides security for the Gulf, and the Gulf sells oil in dollars. That deal is currently burning in Kuwait. If Washington cannot protect a desalination plant in a partner nation, the value proposition of the American security umbrella evaporates. If you are watching from Europe or Asia, this is why your energy prices will jump 30% next month. It is not because of a shortage of oil, it is because the structural certainty of the energy market has been replaced by terminal instability. That is not a market fluctuation. That is a systemic collapse. We must also examine the failure of the American decapitation strategy. The official line from the White House was that killing the supreme leader on February 28th would cause the Iranian system to implode. They expected a popular uprising. They modeled their plan on the hope of internal chaos. The mathematics of hatred do not work that way. Instead of an uprising, the United States has produced a hardline consolidation. The successor, Mojtaba Khamenei, has spent the last month proving that he is more radical and more vengeful than his father. The strikes on Kuwait were a signature of this new leadership. Washington thought they were removing a leader. They were actually removing a stabilizer. By killing the only man who had the authority to negotiate a peace, the United States has forced itself into a war of attrition with a vengeful zealot who has nothing left to lose. Iran has spent 40 years being sanctioned into a corner. They have built an economy of resistance and an architecture of underground missile cities. The United States, by contrast, is a superpower that depends on a delicate, globalized system of trade. That system is fragile. It is sensitive to price shocks. It is vulnerable to long-term instability. Iran is winning by not losing. The United States is losing by not winning. The strikes in Kuwait also reveal a sophisticated, blinding strategy. According to satellite imagery that has bypassed the official filters, the drones did not just hit the refinery. They hit the radar arrays and communications infrastructure surrounding the industrial zone. This is a deliberate effort to dismantle the eyes of the interceptor network piece by piece. Once the radar dome is gone, the million-dollar Patriot missile becomes a very expensive piece of scrap metal. It cannot find its target. Iran is not trying to sink the United States Navy in an open ocean battle. They are trying to chalk Muham Joy. They are trying to turn the Persian Gulf into a black hole where American technology cannot function. The official briefings say the mission is nearing completion. The structural reality says the United States is being drawn deeper into a geographical trap. The board has shifted, and the geography is asserting its dominance. In the next part of this briefing, we will look at the internal fractures within the Gulf Cooperation Council. We will analyze why Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are looking for a separate peace. And we will moexy the coming food crisis that will be triggered by the collapse of ammonia production in the region. The layers of the onion are being stripped away. And what is underneath is a reality that Washington is not prepared to face. The official narrative is an illusion designed for the crowd. The structural reality belongs to those who perceive the strategic shift behind the curtain. Gain the information advantage by looking beyond the surface and position yourself ahead of the coming global reconfiguration. Donald Trump has stated that the mission is nearing completion, but the structural reality in Kuwait tells a different story. It is the story of a regional partner that is currently absorbing the consequences of a war it was never designed to survive. Let us look at the mathematics of saturation. This is the core of the Iranian strategy. On March 25th, Donald Trump made a statement that should have ended the career of his entire communications team. He claimed that 101 Iranian missiles were fired at the United States ship Abraham Lincoln. He claimed that 100% were intercepted. In the world of physics, this is a lie. In the theater of strategic realism, it is a confession of vulnerability. The Aegis combat system is a marvel of engineering. It is a multi-billion-dollar shield, but it is a finite shield. To intercept 101 missiles, you must launch at least 101 interceptors. You must achieve 101 simultaneous radar locks. You must manage 101 terminal engagements. Saturation is not a choice. It is a law of physics. When you launch more incoming threats than the defense system can track, the shield fails. Even if the success rate was 95%, 5 missiles would have hit the carrier. 5 missiles would have turned a $13 billion asset into a burning monument to American overreach. Washington is claiming a perfect score, while the smoke is still visible from space. The second-order effect of this engagement is the liquidation of the interceptor stockpile. Every Patriot missile costs over $4 million. Every terminal high-altitude area defense interceptor costs $12 million. Iran is using missiles that cost $50,000. This is a bankruptcy proceeding disguised as a naval battle. The United States is burning through years of production in weeks. We are seeing a strategic inversion where the most expensive military in history is being bled dry by the most cost-effective enchet. This is not a victory. It is a mathematical liquidation. Now, let us examine the strategic paradox of the alliance with Kuwait. The United States has used Kuwaiti bases for decades to project power into Iraq and Iran. Washington promised security in exchange for geography. But as the desalination plants burn, that promise has become a liability. The United States Navy lacks the specialized, low-profile mine-clearing capability required for the shallow waters of the Gulf. The Royal Navy possesses that capability. It is the one thing Washington needs and cannot buy. To publicly humiliate the leader of the United Kingdom, as the administration did recently, is a strategic error of the highest order. Germany has already called the mine-clearing mission a suicide operation. France has negotiated a separate peace. Italy and Spain have declined to participate. Without the United Kingdom, the United States is operationally alone in the water. Leverage is not cooperation, and a thirsty ally is a useless ally. The reality behind the curtain is that the security architecture of the Gulf is dead. It has been replaced by a transaction. And the cost of that transaction is the loss of American credibility across the entire theater. Let us look at the economic heart of this conflict. The news reports focus on the energy crisis. They speak of a return to the 1970s, but this is far quat than the 1970s. In 1973, the disruption was a political choice by the oil-producing nations. In 2026, the disruption is a physical reality of the battlefield. When the refinery in Kuwait was taken offline, the capacity to process oil did not just stop, it was destroyed. When Qatar Energy suspended its natural gas production, the energy lifeline of Europe was severed. This is not a negotiation. It is an attrition of the global supply chain. The petrodollar is the air that Washington breathes. It is what allows the United States to run a debt of $34 trillion. But the petrodollar requires two things. Oil must be sold in dollars, and the United States must protect the oil. Right now, the United States cannot protect the oil. And Iran is demanding payment in Chinese yuan to transit the Strait of Hormuz. This is the end game of the conflict. If the world no longer needs dollars to buy energy, the American economy becomes a house of cards. The petrodollar was built on the promise of security. That promise is currently sinking in the Persian Gulf. The American consumer is seeing the first signs of this collapse at the gasoline pump. $7 a gallon is not just a high price, it is a political earthquake. Trump is nearing completion because he has a midterm election in November. He needs the war to stop before the economy destroys his party. But Tehran is not operating on a political calendar. They are operating on a civilizational timeline. They have seen the Zoom war. They have seen American soldiers managing a conflict from hotel rooms in Europe because their bases in Iraq and the United Arab Emirates are no longer safe. They have seen the world's NH-AT advanced fighter jets being engaged by coastal batteries. The superpower is retreating into a digital bunker. The final layer of the onion is the survival strategy. Iran has realized that they do not need to sink the Hamjoy. They only need to outlast the American political tolerance for pain. Every day the war continues, the cost to Washington increases. Every day the strait remains closed. The petrodollar weakens. Iran is winning by Kong losing. The United States is losing by Kong winning. Trump says the objectives are nearing completion, but he has achieved none of his primary goals. The Iranian regime is more unified than ever. The nuclear program is now a strategic necessity for their survival. The regional allies of the United States are looking for a way out. The United States is declaring victory while the foundations of its power are being liquidated. The successor problem remains the most dangerous unintended consequence. Mojtaba Khamenei is watching the American retreat. He is seeing the exhaustion of the interceptor stockpiles. He is seeing the failure of the maximum pressure campaign. He is the NHAT who will define the post-war order in the Middle East, and he has no interest in the Western version of peace. The mainstream narrative is a distraction. They want you to focus on the podiums and the press conferences. The reality is found in the tanker tracking data. It is found in the empty missile tubes of the destroyers. It found in the rising yields of the bond markets. The board has shifted, the geography has asserted its dominance, and the official version of the war is nearing completion only because the official version has lost its grip on reality. The architecture of deterrence has been tested, and it has failed. As we move into the final phase of this conflict, the question is no longer about Iran. The question is about the United States. How much of its global credibility is it willing to sacrifice to maintain the illusion of victory? The answer will be found in the coming months, as the midterms approach and the bills for this war finally come due. The world is watching. The allies are recalibrating, and the geography remains as Luon, the only God that does not change its mind. Behind the narrative, the structural reality is a liquidation the old order. The official narrative is an illusion designed for the crowd. The structural reality belongs to those who perceive the strategic shift behind the curtain. Gain the information advantage by looking beyond the surface and position yourself ahead of the coming global reconfiguration.